They were just about to close the casket when she leaned close behind me and whispered in my ear, "You have a week to get out." I was holding the funeral program on my lap. My hands were squeezing it so hard I bent the edge without even noticing. I didn't turn around. I just sat there, stiff as a board, acting like I hadn't heard her. The priest kept talking about peace and closure, but none of that meant anything to me. My son Aaron was gone, only 33, a heart attack that came out of nowhere. He was the only person who really cared about me. Now I was sitting beside his casket while his wife Madison stood there in her fancy black dress, dabbing her eyes like she was heartbroken, even though she was already planning how to kick me out. After she whispered her threat, she squeezed my shoulder real soft, like she was trying to comfort me. I didn't move. People started drifting past, and someone behind me whispered, "She's been so strong, losing a husband at her age. I can't even imagine." I almost laughed because all I could feel was this hot, angry ache in my chest. But I stayed quiet through the whole service, through the final prayer, even when folks began heading over to the reception hall. When it was time to leave, Madison made a big show of helping her grandmother out to the car, but she left me standing alone on the sidewalk. I ended up riding with her in Aaron's car. She didn't say one word to me the whole way. The car still smelled like Aaron's cologne. I thought that scent might finally make me cry, but I was too busy trying to figure out what game she was playing. Back at the house, Madison welcomed everyone in. She gave this little speech about how strong Aaron was, how funny he'd been, how much he loved family. I just stood behind the kitchen counter, watching her. She poured wine, made a toast, and hugged people like some actress playing a grieving widow on TV, but I saw the truth in the small things. The family photo that used to sit by the stairs was gone. His old army case had disappeared. She was already wiping away every trace of him when everyone finally left. I went to my room, the room I'd been living in for 7 years, and saw the door wide open. My blankets were folded, the lamp was unplugged. I opened the dresser drawers, half of them were empty. My jewelry box was missing. The closet had boxes stacked up with labels that said Mom's stuff. I just stood there, feeling like my brain couldn't catch up with everything that was happening. I walked back out to the kitchen, and there she was, Madison, sitting at the table with a glass of wine in one hand and her phone in the other. She didn't even look up when I came in. I cleared my throat and asked, "Did you move my things?" She finally lifted her eyes and said, "I was just organizing. There's a moving company I can call whenever you're ready." She said it so sweet, like she was doing me a favor. I asked, "Where's my jewelry?" She took a slow sip of her wine and said, "Some of it's in the safe. You wouldn't want anything to get lost while people were going in and out." I said, "I never told you to touch my things." She sighed like she was bored. "Aaron and I talked about this," she said. "It's not personal. We just thought you'd want to move back to your sister's." I stared at her. "I don't have a sister." She knew that. "This is my home," I told her. She shrugged. It was his home. He would have wanted us to have space to grieve. Then she looked back at her phone, like I wasn't even standing there. I left the kitchen before I said something I'd regret. I went back to my room and started checking the drawers again, trying to breathe, trying to think. I looked under the bed for the box where I kept my important papers, but it was gone. My heart was thumping so hard it hurt. I opened the closet and saw a plastic bin marked Old Docs. I dragged it down and dug through it, old receipts, junk mail, warranty slips. Finally, I found my folder with my medical records, bank papers, and passport. But no matter how many times I flipped through everything, the house deed was missing, the one Aaron insisted had both our names on it, the one we kept safe ever since I helped him with the down payment after he lost his job. That paper should have been there. I checked twice. Just then, Madison's voice floated down the hallway. "Hey," she called out, all casual, "do you want leftover salad or should I toss it?" I didn't answer her. My hand was shaking now because I knew the deed was gone. The next morning, the kitchen was quiet. There wasn't even the smell of coffee anymore by the time I walked in. Madison was sitting at the dining table, typing on her laptop like it was just another Tuesday. She looked up with that same fake smile and said, "Morning. Just checking a few quotes for movers." I opened the fridge. All the containers I'd labeled with my name were gone. In their place were neat stacks of Tupperware that weren't mine. "I didn't ask for movers," I told her. She kept tapping her keyboard. "Right, but you said you wanted to handle things on your timeline. I thought this might help." She took a sip of coffee and clicked something fast on her screen. I didn't bother arguing. I walked into the living room and stopped short. My son's old recliner, the one he always sat in, was gone. In its place was a cheap-looking leather chair. His blanket was balled up behind the TV like something you'd leave for the dog. "Where's Erin's recliner?" I asked. She didn't even glance up. It was old, didn't fit the room anymore. I stared at her. "It's been a week." She finally looked annoyed. "It's been 9 days," she snapped. "I'm not going to sit in a dead man's chair, Ellen." That was the first time she said Erin's name like it was nothing. Just a word. I couldn't stay in that room a second longer. I turned and walked outside, trying to breathe. I sat on the porch steps, pulled out my phone, and called a lawyer. Erin had recommended years ago when we were updating our wills. The secretary said he could see me that afternoon. I didn't tell Madison. I just left. When I walked into Mr. Holt's office, he recognized Erin's name right away. "Solid guy," he said. "I'm sorry for your loss." I told him everything, how Madison kept saying I had to move out, how my name was on the deed, and how the paper was missing. "Now, how long have you lived there?" he asked. 7 years, I said. "Since they bought the house. Do you have any proof you paid part of the down payment?" "I used a cashier's check," I said, my voice shaking a little. "I still have the receipt." His eyes lit up. "Then we may have something." I leaned in closer. "Can you explain? If your name is on the deed and you can prove you helped buy that house, she can't just kick you out. Not legally." I felt like I could finally breathe. He told me to find that cashier's check and, if I could, the original purchase papers. I thanked him and drove home, gripping the steering wheel so hard my hands hurt. When I walked in, Madison was on the phone, pacing near the hallway. "No, she doesn't know anything," she said. When she noticed me, her voice dropped to a hush. "It's handled." I didn't say a word. I just walked past her and went straight to the attic. My heart was beating so loud I thought she might hear it. Erin used to keep old boxes up there, stuff, taxes, moving papers. I climbed up and started digging through everything, dust swirling around me. My hands were shaking, but I kept going. I found a box labeled "Home Purchase." My breath caught in my throat. I pulled it down and sat cross-legged on the attic floor. Papers spilled everywhere. Closing statements, insurance, bank loans, and then I saw it, a big manila envelope marked "Final Deed." I opened it, my name, my signature, his signature, all dated, notarized, filed. I sat there, letting it sink in. Madison was bluffing. She either didn't know, or she was hoping I didn't remember. I slid the envelope inside my coat and climbed back down the ladder. She was standing at the bottom, pretending she just happened to be there. "Looking for something?" she asked, raising her eyebrows. I looked her right in the eye. "Just some old paperwork. Nothing important." She gave me a tight smile. "That's good. I wouldn't want you to get stressed." Then she turned and walked off to the kitchen like we hadn't just been fighting a silent war. That night I made copies of the deed. I scanned it into my email and set up a folder called "For Lawyer Only." I wasn't about to be caught off guard again. She thought she was ahead, but now I had proof. I just needed to be careful. Around 9 that night, she walked in holding 2 glasses of wine. "I figured we should talk." "Clear the air," she said. I took the glass but didn't drink it. "Okay." She sat down across from me on the couch. "I know things have been tense," she began, "but Erin always said this house was for us, for our future family." I stayed quiet. She looked down into her wine. "I don't want this to get ugly. I just want to move forward." I looked at her left hand. She was still wearing his wedding ring. She lifted her eyes. "You understand, right?" I asked calmly. "Have you spoken to a lawyer?" Her face twitched, just a flicker. "No, I didn't think it was necessary." I smiled a little. "Maybe it is." Her eyes narrowed. She took a long sip of wine. "Are you threatening me, Ellen?" I smiled wider. "No, just thinking out loud." She stood up slowly. "I hope we can do this the easy way." "So do I," I said. She walked down the hall without another word, her wine glass still in her hand. When she was gone, I pulled out my phone and checked the scanned deed again. My name was clear as day. She thought she had me cornered, but she didn't know what I'd just found in that attic. And the next morning was coming fast. I printed 2 copies of the deed and slipped them into a sealed envelope with my lawyer's name on it. I didn't even call ahead. I just drove over, handed the envelope to his assistant, and said, "This is time sensitive." Then I turned around and walked out before she could ask any questions. When I got back to the house, Madison was in the garage, clearing the shelves like she was already done being sad. She looked up when I pulled in and said, real casual, "Hey, just getting rid of junk, hope that's okay." I nodded and walked inside, pretending not to see that all of Aaron's fishing gear was gone. I went straight to my room and opened the top drawer of my nightstand. It was locked. That drawer had never had a lock before. I got a flathead screwdriver and pried it open. My prescription bottle was gone. So was the small envelope of cash I kept there. She was sending a message. She wanted me to know I didn't have any privacy left. I sat on the bed, breathing through my teeth, until the burning in my chest finally calmed down. Then I did something I hadn't done since Aaron died. I went into his office and opened the filing cabinet. In the third drawer, there was a folder labeled Refinance Options. Inside were newer mortgage statements with both our names on them, dated less than a year ago, that mattered. Madison hadn't been added, not even after the refinance. I snapped a photo and saved it to my cloud. Out in the hallway, I heard Madison talking on speakerphone. Yeah, she's still here. I know, it's awkward, but she doesn't have any real claim. A pause. No, her name's not on the current utilities or tax bills. It'll be fine. I stepped into the hallway and made just enough noise so she'd know I'd heard every word. She turned around, eyes wide. Everything okay? I looked her in the eye. You really should be careful what you say in this house. The walls are thin. Then I walked to the kitchen and started making coffee like nothing had happened. After that, she stayed out of my way. Around 6 that evening, I walked past the living room and saw she'd replaced the family portrait with a picture of blue mountains and empty snow. No people in it at all. I stared longer than I meant to. That night, she ordered Chinese food. She left my dinner in the bag on the counter. No note, no kindness. I took the food to my room and locked the door behind me with the little wedge I'd been using since last week. I wasn't taking any chances. At 2 in the morning, I heard footsteps outside my room. Slow, deliberate. I got up and pressed my ear to the door. No knock. Just a long pause. Then the sound of retreating steps. In the morning, my alarm clock was flashing. The power had been out for exactly 1 minute. I checked the circuit breaker. Everything was fine. I didn't say a word to her at breakfast. She offered me coffee like nothing had happened. I turned it down. Then I went back to the lawyer's office. This time, I sat across from Mr. Holt and laid out everything: the photos of the refinance documents, the deed copies. He looked over each paper, nodding. She has no legal standing, he said. Her name never appears anywhere. And you've contributed both money and residence for over 7 years. If she tries to evict you, she'll lose. I asked if I could file something ahead of time. He nodded. We'll draft a notice of shared ownership and prepare a legal response to any false claim. If she serves you papers, we'll answer immediately. I asked, what's my risk? Only if you lose your documents, he said calmly. Keep them safe. Stay calm. I drove home with a new feeling in my chest. Not grief, not fear, focus. When I walked in, Madison was folding laundry on the couch. She looked up and asked, "Did you go somewhere?" "Just needed some fresh air," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "You seemed confident all of a sudden." I smiled. "I just remembered something important." She stared at me for a second. "Well, I hope it doesn't make things harder." I opened the fridge. My labeled food was back in there. Same handwriting. That night, I heard her talking on the phone again from the guest room. "Yeah, she's acting weird. I might need to move up the timeline." A pause. "If she finds that file, we're screwed." She didn't know I already had it. She didn't know the file was sitting safe with my lawyer. But now I was sure she was hiding something much bigger than just a fight over the house. 3 days later, Madison announced over coffee like it was nothing that she was hosting a grief gathering for Aaron's friends and coworkers. "Just a little closure," she said, pouring almond milk into her mug and ignoring the second mug I'd set out for her. She didn't ask me to help get ready. That was fine. She barely looked at me all week, except to remind me to keep the guest bathroom clean and not to talk about personal things. If I talked to anyone that night, I didn't argue. I just kept quiet and watched. I watched Madison roll out Aaron's old bar cart like she was setting up for a fancy cocktail party. I watched her line the counters with mini quiches and expensive crackers, like we hadn't just buried my son. The first guest showed up a little after 6. It was Kyle, Aaron's friend from work. He gave me a long hug and whispered, "He talked about you all the time. Said you were the one person he could always count on." I nodded and held back my tears. Then more people came, neighbors, co-workers, a couple of Madison's Pilates friends, some faces I knew, some I didn't. Madison floated around the living room with a glass in her hand, giving little speeches about how generous and warm Erin had been. I stood by the back wall, just watching her, watching how she smiled at strangers while ignoring that she'd already ripped his books off the shelves and tossed half his things in the trash. At one point, a woman came over and asked, "How are you holding up?" I said, "As well as I can be, considering I still live here." She looked confused. I added, "Erin and I combed the house. Madison's handling things now, but I'm still living here." Her eyebrows shot up. "Oh, I thought she said it was hers." I smiled politely. "Easy mistake." About an hour later, I noticed Madison watching me from across the room. Her face still held that calm party smile, but her eyes were tight and cold. When things quieted down, she walked over and said, "Can I speak to you for a moment?" I followed her into the hallway. She shut the door behind us. "Are you trying to start something?" she demanded. I answered a question honestly. I said. She stepped closer. "Don't play cute, Ellen. These people don't need to hear about paperwork." I folded my arms, then stopped lying about it. She stared at me, her jaw clenched. Then she took a breath and smoothed her hair. "Look, this is delicate," she said. "These are people who cared about Erin. They're here to support me." "Then maybe don't throw a wine mixer in the house you're trying to erase him from," I shot back. Her face turned pink with anger. "If you don't want to be here, you're free to leave." I smiled. "Oh, I'm not going anywhere." She leaned in so close I could feel her breath. She whispered, just like she had at the funeral, "You think you're clever, Ellen, but you don't know how this works. I'll make sure you regret staying." Then she walked back out to her guests, wearing that same polite expression like nothing had happened. The rest of the evening, I kept to myself. I watched, I listened. I noticed one man I didn't recognize, a guy in his 40s with a shaved head and a fancy coat. He kept glancing at me like he was trying to figure out who I was. He talked quietly to Madison in the hallway, then left early. There was something about the way he moved, cautious and careful, that stuck in my mind. After everyone left, Madison cleaned up without saying a word. I didn't offer to help, and she didn't ask. Around midnight, I walked past the guest room and spotted a manila folder sitting open in her tote bag. It hadn't been there earlier. I stepped back into my room, grabbed my phone, and quietly took a picture through the crack in the door. The label on the folder read, "Doc Copy's backup plan." Later, when I heard her get in the shower, I slipped into the hallway. My heart was hammering as I unzipped her bag. Inside were more folders. One said, "House Timeline." Another said, "E-Signatures, 2023. I didn't take anything, I just took photos. One folder had a screenshot of a will with a digital signature I'd never seen before. The corner read, "Filed March 4th. Erin had died. February 2nd. He hadn't signed anything in March." My breath froze in my chest. The water shut off, and I moved fast, closing her bag and slipping back into my room before she came out, humming to herself and wrapped in a robe. My hands were still shaking, but now I had more than a deed. I had proof she was forging things, trying to steal control of everything. Tomorrow, I was going to find out exactly what E-Signatures 2023 was supposed to be. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of soft crying in the kitchen. It wasn't real sobbing, just the gentle, careful sniffles you do when you want someone to notice. When I walked in, Madison was standing by the sink in her robe, holding a crumpled tissue and staring out the window like she was in some soap opera. As soon as she saw me, she turned, wiped her eyes with the edge of her hand, and forced a small smile. "I'm sorry," she said, voice trembling just a little. "Sometimes it just hits me all over again." Then she laid a hand on her belly. Not in a big dramatic way, just enough that I noticed, and I froze, because that was new. She looked up at me and said softly, "I didn't want to say anything until I was sure. I'm pregnant, Ellen." And for a full 5 seconds, I couldn't even breathe. I couldn't talk. I couldn't move. It didn't make sense, not after everything I'd seen, and definitely not with the timing. So I finally asked, "How far along?" She answered fast, 8 weeks, maybe 9. And right then, everything clicked into place, because Erin had been dead for 10 weeks. I just stared at her, trying to keep the alarm off my face. She walked over like she was proud of herself and set a sonogram photo on the table like it was some kind of trophy. I picked it up and turned it over slowly. taking in every detail. Her name was printed in the corner, along with the clinic and the date clear. The date wasn't 10 weeks ago. It was 4. That's when I knew. The pregnancy had nothing to do with Aaron. This was about control. I used a donor, she said softly. Aaron and I talked about it, just in case. He wanted me to have a piece of him. But I knew she was lying. If Aaron had planned something like that, he would have told me. I didn't say a word. I just handed the photo back. She tucked her hair behind her ear and said, I hope you understand now why it's so important for me to have stability. For the baby's sake. And in that moment, I saw exactly what she was doing. She was setting herself up to look like the grieving widow, pregnant and helpless, forced to share a house with her unstable mother-in-law, something she could use in court if she had to. I nodded slowly and said, that changes things. Her face softened right away. She really thought I was buying it, that I was giving up. But the second she walked out of the room, I grabbed my phone. I pulled up the photo I'd taken of the document in her bag and matched the sonogram date to the file, day just 4 days apart, both from the same week, both planted as fake evidence. I forwarded everything to Mr. Holt with a short message. We need to talk. Within an hour, he called me. This actually helps us, he said. If she's claiming dependency or emotional hardship, we can force her to show medical records and prove her timeline. I asked, what if she faked the whole thing? Then it's fraud, he said calmly. And if you keep documenting everything without losing your temper, we'll win before it ever goes to trial. She's trying to bait me into reacting, I said. Then don't, he told me. So I didn't. I stayed quiet. I cleaned the bathroom. I folded laundry. I smiled when she made little comments like, this baby's going to need so much space, or, it's going to be hard raising a child in a hostile environment. Every time, she watched me, waiting to see if I'd snap. I just nodded and kept my mouth shut. Until Friday. That morning, I found an envelope slid under my bedroom door. It was a manila folder, marked urgent 48 hours notice. Inside was a typed document that didn't look official at all. It said I had 48 hours to leave the property because of emotional instability and personal threats. I sat there staring at it. My heart wasn't even pounding with fear. It was pounding because she'd finally gotten sloppy. She'd handed me a lie I could crush with one email. Then, I read the last line. Failure to vacate will result in law enforcement involvement and potential elder neglect claims. And that was it. That was the card she'd decided to play. She was going to try to paint me as some dangerous old woman in unstable, violent, unfit to be in the house. Even though all I'd done was make toast and fold towels, she was hoping this would scare me into running before I could fight back. But right then, I knew exactly what I had to do. I couldn't just wait around for her to overplay her hand. She already had. I didn't say a word. I didn't leave a note. I just folded the fake eviction notice, slipped it into my folder, with all the other things Madison had so helpfully handed me over the past 2 weeks, and drove straight to Mr. Holt's office. No appointment, no delay. Because this wasn't about defending my right to live there anymore. This was about taking apart the little fantasy world she was trying to build. When I sat down across from Mr. Holt and handed him the newest document, he read the last line, and actually let out a small laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was so ridiculous. She's threatening you with elder neglect charges, he said, shaking his head, while you're the one being emotionally harassed, documented, and financially gaslighted. I told him everything: the fake pregnancy timeline, the IVF clinic label, the donor date, the staged photos, the phone calls. And I knew, in my bones, she was about to find out exactly how wrong she'd been to underestimate me. I told Mr. Holt everything I'd overheard at night, all the little conversations I'd gotten Madison to have without ever even raising my voice. He listened carefully, then said, "We're past just a simple argument now. This is the kind of stuff that leads to a fraud lawsuit. If she's changed financial records or used your identity in any way, she could be facing criminal charges." I asked, "What's the fastest way to prove it?" He said, "We can ask the court to force her to hand over her digital records, her emails, text messages, medical files, and bank information." "Would a judge even approve that?" I asked. "If we show them the forged eviction notice, the fake pregnancy dates, and the way she lied about who owned the deed? Not only will they grant it," he said, "but we'll have real leverage." I sat there, taking a deep breath. feeling something I hadn't felt since Aaron died. I wasn't just barely getting by anymore. I was about to turn this around on the person who thought she could erase me. On my way home, I stopped at a print shop and made 3 neat binders with every single piece of proof. The deed with my name on it, the refinance paperwork, the sonogram photo with the wrong date, the text of her fake eviction threat, the names of everyone who'd watched her try to pretend she owned the house during that grief gathering. I labeled the binder, spine case file Madison. I put 1 copy in my safe deposit box, 1 at Mr. Holt's office, and 1 under a loose floorboard in my closet where she wouldn't find it, no matter how hard she tried. That night, when I came home, Madison was in the kitchen on a video call. She was laughing, wearing her headset, and telling someone, "Yeah, I'll have access to the place within 2 weeks, tops." I stood behind the wall, frozen. That's when it hit me. She wasn't even planning to stay here. She was probably going to sell the house. All this wasn't about grief or wanting a fresh start. She just wanted the property rights so she could cash in. I stepped into the kitchen and made sure she saw me. I didn't say a word at first. I just walked to the fridge, took out a bottle of water, and looked right at her until she hung up. She turned around slowly. "Do you need something?" she asked, her voice a little too sweet. I said, "Just so you know, if another envelope shows up at my door, it better be stamped by the court. Anything else goes straight to my lawyer." She blinked fast, like I'd slapped her. "Are you threatening me now?" "No," I said calmly. "You started this paperwork war, Madison. I'm just keeping mine legal." Then I walked out before she could say another word. That night, I did one last thing. I logged into Aaron's old email account. He'd once given me the password back when I helped him look for a job. It was still the same, his favorite song lyric, plus his military service number. Most of it was boring job applications, bills. But then I spotted a flagged folder called Estate. Inside was a PDF named Draft Will, February 2023. I opened it, tanned, my breath caught. The signature wasn't Aaron's handwriting. The notary stamp looked like it had been copied and pasted. And worst of all, the document said Madison was the only heir and the sole owner of the house. There was no mention of me at all, even though the date was 1 week before he died. I printed it right away. My heart was hammering because I knew this was the thing she was trying so hard to hide. I checked the file info. The document hadn't been created on Aaron's computer or any law offices. The creator was listed as Madison K. Drafts. I emailed it straight to Mr. Holt with 1 line. She forged his will. I didn't even flinch when I hit send. The next morning, Mr. Holt called me before I'd even finished my toast. His voice was calm but serious. "We're filing today," he said. And that was it. The moment everything changed. We weren't just defending my right to stay in my own home anymore. We were going on offense. Now we had digital proof of forgery. Proof she meant to commit fraud. Proof she'd doctored legal documents with her own computer. Mr. Holt walked me step by step through what we were doing. Next, filing a motion to freeze the property title so she couldn't sell it, asking the court to review the will, submitting a fraud alert with probate court, and putting a legal notice on the house so she couldn't refinance or transfer ownership behind my back. He added, "You don't have to give her any of this yourself. The court will handle it." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me, because finally, someone else was going to speak for me, and I didn't have to pretend anymore. I felt like I had no power in that house I'd helped pay for. But by noon that day, Madison must have sensed something had changed, because suddenly she was acting way too friendly. She offered to make me lunch and asked if I wanted to help her shop for baby things. When I told her no, she tilted her head, trying to look sweet, and said, "Are we good?" I just smiled a little and said, "We'll see." That afternoon, while she was out running errands, I got a call from a process server. He told me, "We'll be delivering some papers later today. Do not engage." I said, "Trust me, I won't." I sat on the couch with the blinds open, just waiting. Around 5 p.m., Madison pulled into the driveway in her shiny new SUV with 2 shopping bags. She stepped onto the porch, and right then, a man in a gray jacket got out of his car. He walked up to her, said her full name in a calm, practiced voice. She looked confused and said, "Yes." He handed her a thick envelope. "You've been served, probate fraud and property injunction." She blinked, her mouth falling open. "What the hell is this?" He told her, "You'll need to read it," and walked away without another word. I watched her through the window as she stood there, just holding the envelope like it was too heavy. Then her eyes shifted toward the house, right at me. I didn't move, I didn't blink. She came inside fast, her footsteps sharp, and slammed the envelope onto the dining table. She tore it open and started scanning the first page, then the second. I heard her whisper, "No, no, no." Then she shouted, "She's lying. This is all lies." She spun toward me, her eyes wild. "What did you tell them?" I stood up, calm as ever, and said, "I didn't tell them anything. The documents did." She threw the envelope on the floor and stormed into the kitchen, muttering to herself, "I'll fix this. This isn't happening." I didn't say another word. She wasn't even talking to me anymore. She was yelling at the world that had finally told her no. That night, she didn't eat. She didn't talk. She didn't come out of her room. The next morning, I looked outside and saw her pacing in the front yard, phone pressed to her ear, hissing, "Just get me a lawyer who knows how to bury this." Then she added, "I don't care what it costs. She's just an old woman." I stepped onto the porch with my arms crossed, making sure she knew I'd heard every word. 2 days later, we had a court date set. It was a preliminary hearing to decide if the will was real and who actually owned the house. When we showed up, Madison came in wearing a cream-colored blazer, holding that fake ultrasound photo like it was some kind of proof she was the victim. Her lawyer started talking, in a soft, careful voice, about how Madison was just a grieving widow trying to protect her unborn child. But Mr. Holt wasn't having it. He laid out every piece of evidence, clear and cold side-by-side examples of Aaron's real signature and the fake one Madison had submitted, computer records showing she'd edited the document herself, refinance paperwork that never included her name, and finally, the deed with my name right there, legally filed and untouched. When Mr. Holt said, "Your Honor, my client has been a co-owner of this property since day one," the judge leaned forward, looked through the file, and said, "Counselor, this is extremely clear." I watched Madison's whole body sag, like the fight drained out of her all at once. Her shoulders slumped, her mouth opened like she might scream but couldn't. Then the judge said, "Temporary ownership freeze is lifted. Ms. Ellen retains legal ownership. All eviction claims are void. As for the will, it's subject to fraud investigation." Madison's lawyer leaned over and whispered something to her, and she looked at him like he'd stabbed her in the back. I stood there, steady and quiet. This wasn't about gloating. It was just the truth finally coming out in the open. As we left the courtroom, Mr. Holt turned to me and said, "Now we wait to see if she pushes back or packs her bags." When we got in the car, I checked my phone and saw an email from the court confirming my ownership of the house. I smiled not out of spite, but because I finally felt like I could breathe again. The next morning, the house was too quiet, not peaceful, more like that heavy stillness right before a storm. I walked into the kitchen, and there she was, already dressed in all black like she was headed to another funeral. She sat at the table, staring down at a legal pad covered in names and phone numbers. She didn't look up when I came in. She just said in a flat voice, "You think you've won." I poured my coffee without saying a word, letting Madison fill the quiet with her own frustration. She finally snapped, "You think just because you got a judge to believe your little story that it's over." I turned to face her and said, calmly, "It wasn't a story, Madison. It was the law that set her off." She jumped up so fast her chair scraped across the tile. "You don't get to steal everything from me," she yelled. I looked her straight in the eye. "You tried to erase me from a house I helped build, from a life I was always part of. You used a fake will and a fake pregnancy to do it." She froze with her mouth open, and for a second, I could see she was trying to come up with another excuse. She tried softening her voice. I was grieving, but the act didn't work anymore. We both knew it. "Pack your things," I told her. "I'm giving you the same respect you never gave me. I'm not calling to show." She looked like she wanted to scream again, but instead just clenched her jaw, grabbed her phone, and stormed out the door. I sat down and took a sip of my coffee. For the first time in weeks, it didn't taste like fear. The rest of the house was so still it felt like the first breath after being underwater too long. I walked into Aaron's old room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of his bed. I looked around at the empty shelves and the walls he'd painted himself. "We're okay now, baby, I promise," I whispered. Then I opened the top drawer, one I hadn't dared to touch since the funeral, and found something I hadn't expected. A folded piece of paper, written in his handwriting, dated 3 weeks before he died. At the top it said, "If anything happens to me, I need you to know I'm sorry. I felt my chest tighten as I read line after line. He wrote about feeling guilty, about how Madison had pulled him away from everyone, how he knew she was manipulative but thought he could fix it. He said she'd made him feel like he had to pick sides, and he didn't know how to tell me anymore. At the bottom, in shaky letters, it read, "Don't let her take everything. This house was always ours, not hers. Do what you have to do, Mom." My hands were shaking, but not from sadness, from clarity. Even after he was gone, Aaron had tried to leave me the truth. I scanned the letter into my phone and locked the original in my drawer beside the deed. By sunset, Madison came back with a fire in her eyes. She walked straight into the kitchen and glared at me. "You'll regret this," she spat. "I'll go to the press. I'll tell everyone you bullied a grieving widow." I looked her right in the face. "Then I'll show them the ultrasound dates, the metadata from the will, and the letter Aaron left me." Her face turned so pale she looked like she might faint. She whispered, "You're bluffing. Try me," I said. She didn't answer. She turned around, stomped down the hall, and slammed her door so hard a picture frame fell off the wall. I didn't flinch. I just picked it up, set it back in place, and went to make dinner like it was any other evening. While the pasta boiled, I texted Mr. Holt, "Found a personal letter. Strengthens motive. I'll forward." He wrote back almost immediately, "Send it. It's bulletproof." That night, for the first time in months, I slept with the window open, no door wedge, no backup key under my pillow, just fresh air and quiet. In the morning, I heard boxes being packed. By Sunday, the hallway outside Madison's bedroom was lined with cardboard boxes, some labeled, some not, some with tape barely sticking like she'd thrown everything together in a rush. I didn't ask if she was really leaving. I already knew she was out of moves, and whatever bluff she was clinging to had crumbled under the weight of court orders and her own arrogance. When she finally came into the kitchen, she didn't say anything at first. She opened a drawer, closed it again, like she was searching for something that never existed. Then she finally turned to me and said quietly, "I'll be out by Friday." I nodded. No smile, no snark, just a calm, steady nod like this was nothing more than a meeting about moving boxes. She added, "You can have your house back." I looked her dead in the eye and said, "It was never yours to give." That hit her harder than any yelling ever could. She froze, eyes darting like she wanted to say something cruel, but couldn't find any words that wouldn't crumble in her mouth. I walked past her and put the kettle on the stove, not for drama, but because, honestly, I just wanted a cup of tea. And I'd learned by now, sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stay calm and carry on. All I had left to do was not react, just keep living like she was already gone. That afternoon, she had 2 friends over. Their voices were loud in the hallway as they helped her haul out boxes. I stayed in my room while they whispered things, like, "She's insane, and how did you even live here with her?" But I didn't answer. Those weren't questions worth my time. The next morning, she tried one last sad little move. She called Aaron's old friend Kyle. She left him a voicemail claiming I'd made up everything, that Aaron never wanted me in the house, that I'd manipulated the courts with elder abuse tactics to steal it from her. What she didn't know was that Kyle had already talked to me. He'd seen the court papers. He'd read the letter Aaron wrote. He texted me the message she left him, along with just one line. "She's desperate." I didn't reply. There was nothing more to say. By Thursday, her car was loaded with the last of her things. Her face was pale, makeup smeared under her eyes like she'd finally accepted this wasn't just a legal defeat, it was personal, public, and permanent. She came to the door holding her last bag and said quietly, "You don't have to do this." "Neither did you," I said. She stepped back like she hadn't expected that. Like she wanted me to get emotional, maybe scream, cry, say something she could use to tell the world I was the villain. But I didn't. I just stood there, calm and steady, watching her realize in real time that she'd played every card, burned every lie, and ended up exactly where she started, standing on a porch she never owned, with a future she couldn't sell. I opened the door and said, "You have until midnight." She stared at me, voice small. "Where am I supposed to go?" "Anywhere that isn't here," I said. Then I closed the door, not to be cruel, but to be done. From the window, I watched her stand there a long minute, frozen, before she finally walked to her car, slammed the trunk, and drove away without looking back. I didn't cry, I didn't cheer, I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt done. That night, when the sun went down, I turned off the porch light, locked the door, and for the first time in months let myself sit in the quiet without listening for footsteps or watching my back. She was gone. The house was mine, again, unclaimed, and still, I thought that was the end of it. Until I walked into the living room and saw the small silver flash drive she'd left on the coffee table. No label, just sitting there like bait. My stomach turned, because Madison never left anything behind by accident. Not after everything she'd done. Not when every move she made was calculated and dressed up to look like kindness. I stood there, a long time, staring at it, thinking about leaving it alone, throwing it away, pretending it didn't exist. But after everything I'd survived, I wasn't going to let this story end with some loose thread. So I plugged it into Erin's old laptop, the one she never touched because she said it smelled like dust and grief, and waited as the screen flickered to life. One folder. No password. A single file called Open Me. I clicked it. It was a video. Grainy at first, then slowly clearing as the camera adjusted. Madison sat in Erin's old office chair, the same one I'd used to check my email that morning. She looked straight into the webcam, her face calm but smug, like she was still playing chess in her mind. "If you're watching this," she said evenly, "then I'm either gone, or you think you've won." Her tone made my skin crawl, so certain, so self-satisfied. "I did what I had to do," she went on, "and maybe I crossed a line, but you were never supposed to stay here forever, Ellen. You were a placeholder, a guest who overstayed her welcome." She leaned closer to the camera, her eyes going cold. "Erin wanted to ask you to leave before he died," she said, voice lowering like a threat. "He just didn't have the guts to say it." I hit pause, my jaw clenched, my heart thudded in my chest. Even now, even after losing everything, she was trying to plant seeds of doubt, trying to dig at the one thing she couldn't take, my bond with my son. I took a breath. And then I hit play again. I told him we could build something together if we just had space, if he could finally let go of the past. But he was weak. He couldn't cut the cord, so I had to do it for him. She smiled then, like that was some kind of triumph. Like isolating him from me had been an act of love instead of control. And she ended the video with, "You can keep the house, Ellen, but you'll never forget this." Then the screen went black. I just sat there for a minute in the quiet that followed, not angry, not even surprised, because that was always her, controlled, cruel, always needing to have the last word. But what she didn't know was that I already had the only thing that mattered: Erin's handwritten letter, the one she could never fake or overwrite, the one where he said "I'm sorry" and told me the truth she'd spent months trying to bury. I took the letter out of my drawer and held it up beside the frozen image of her face on the laptop, and I didn't feel anger or pain, just peace, because in the end, it wasn't about proving who was right. It was about surviving long enough to watch her lose control. I ejected the flash drive and tossed it in the trash. I deleted the file off the laptop, not because I was afraid of her lies, but because I didn't need reminders anymore. The war was over. The house was quiet. Every room was finally mine again. That evening, I unpacked the last of my things from the boxes she'd once labeled for removal. I put Erin's photo back on the shelf in the entryway. I lit a candle in the kitchen. And I sat down at the table, not lonely, just still, just present, just free. As I sipped my tea and listened to the silence, the kind that didn't carry any tension or fear, I looked out at the porch she'd once tried to claim, and I whispered, "My house, my rules." Then I smiled, because for the first time since the funeral, I could breathe in a space that was truly mine. Not because I fought for it, but because I never let her take it.